We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Beis in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 77b. And the previous Amud, the Brisa said that if a Kohen Gadol has relations with an Almana and another Almana and a third Almana, so Eino Chayev Ela Achas, he's only Chayev for one. And the Gemara said, what exactly is the case? If the situation here is three different women who are all Almanas, Hare Gufen Muchlakim, Hare Shemos Muchlakim, it's different individuals, it's different names, of course you should be Chayev on each one. And so the Gemara says, Ella, rather, what the Brisa means to say is, Shabo al Almana Achas Shalosh Bios, that he had relations with one Almana 3 times. The Gemara says, Hey Chidami, well still, what's the case? Idolo Asru Be Pshita Deino Chayev Ela Achas, if they didn't give him warning, so then it's obvious that he's only going to be Chayev 1. Ella de Asru Be'akal Chada V'chada, but then you'll say that there was a warning for each time that he had the relations. But Amayino Chayev Ela Achas, but if that's the case, why is he only Chayev 1? But we learned in the Mishnah, Nazir Shayashose Yayin Kol Hayom Kula, if a Nazir is drinking wine all day, Eino Chayev Ela Achas, only Chayev 1. Amrulo al tishta, but if they say don't drink, and they say don't drink, v'hushos, and then he drinks, chayev al kol achas v'achas, so he's chayev on each individual one. So again, we still have a question, what is the case over here of the 3 almanas? And the Gemara says, lo no tzricha, the case is necessary as follows, shabal almanas Ruvain, shahoisa almanas Shimon, shahoisa almanas Levi, has relations with this woman who's the widow of Ruvain, and she was the widow of Shimon, and she was the widow of Levi. Mahu detema, what might you have said, hare shemos muchlakim, that these are different names, so to speak, she's called an almana from different individuals. Kamash malan, that's what the Bryce is teaching us. Gufim muchlakim ba'inan v'leka, needs to be separate bodies, and you don't have that over here, it's all one individual, and that's why Eino Chayev Ela Achas, that's why there's just one Chayev. And the Gemara continues, the Bryce above said, Almono, Grusha, V'chalola, Zona, that if the woman is an Almana, and then a Grusha, then a Chalola, and then a Zona, particularly in that order, so then he's Chayev on each one. And the Gemara says, Hi Tana, my Kosavar. This Tana, what exactly does the Tana hold? I Kosavar, Isser Chalal Isser. If the Tana holds that one prohibition can be Chal upon another prohibition, so Ibchanami, so if it's in the reverse order as well, what difference does it make what order she has these various statuses? Vi Kosavar, and if the Tana holds Ein Isser Chalal Isser, that one Isser is not Chal on another Isser, Afilu Keseder Hazanamilo, even if it's in this particular order, so it shouldn't be Chal, Ein Isser Chalal Isser. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Haitana Isser Chalal Isser Lesley Isser Mosif Islay. This Tana doesn't hold of the concept of Isser Chalal Isser. However, this Tana does hold of the concept of Isser Mosif. That means to say that if the second Isser, let's say, adds something that was not within the first Isser, then it is able to be Chal. And the Gemara explains how in this particular order there's always something being added. Almana Asur LaKohen Gadol. For example, in Almana, the prohibition is only to a Kohen Gadol. V'shari LaKohen Hedyot, and Almana is allowed to a regular Kohen. Havala Grusha, so now she became a Grusha. Migo the Itosif lo Yisur lagabi Kohen Hedyot. Now that you have an added prohibition to a regular Kohen, Itosif lo Yisur lagabi Kohen Gadol. There's also an added prohibition with regards to a Kohen Gadol. Vadayin shari lamechel b'truma, but this woman is still okay to eat truma. Havala Chalola, so then she becomes a Chalola. Migo the Itosif Yisur lamechel b'truma. Once Chalola adds upon her an Isser in terms of eating truma, Itosif Yisur lagabi Kohen Gadol. Now there's an added Isser as far as the Kohen Gadol as well. And the Gemara says, Ela zona my isra mosef isba. Now by zona, we're talking here about the kind of a zona that is also only to a Kohen. What added isra is there in terms of zona? And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Chana bar Rav Katina. Rav Chana bar Rav Katina says, Hoel v'shem znus posel b'Yisrael. You can have a concept of znus that applies to Yisrael as well. What that means to say is, there are some kinds of zona, particularly, let's say a woman commits adultery, so then she'd be usher to a Yisrael as well. And so therefore, since there are some kinds of zona, shem znus, that can be added onto Yisrael, even though that's not true in this particular case, but that's considered to be Isser Mosif. And Rashi explains, Hoel v'shem znus posel afilu b'Yisrael, since the concept of znus can create a disqualification even by Yisrael, kagonim zin satachta. For example, again, a woman commits adultery while she's married, neseres al bala, she then becomes prohibited to her husband. That's the idea of disqualified to a Yisrael. Hachanami here also, afagav the high znus lav tachas balu, even though the znus we're talking about here is not adultery, miu shem znus eshkachon bein, most of bi'alm in general znus, we do find that it adds something on. And the Gemara continues, Tani Tana Kami de Rav Sheshes, the Tana taught in front of Rav Sheshes, Kol Shu B'Yikach, in any situation where there's an idea of Yikach, we'll see Rashi in a moment, Harehu Below Yikach, so then there's a prohibition of Lo Yikach. Kol She'eno B'Yikach, but if Yikach doesn't apply, Eino Below Yikach, then Lo Yikach will not apply as well. Prat LaKohen Gadol Shaba Ala Choso Almana. This comes to exclude a Kohen Gadol who has relations with his sister, who also happens to be an Almana. And Rashi explains, Kol shu b'yikach v'hu isha b'vsula yikach. The pasuk says by Kohen Gadol that he has to marry a woman who is a besula, who is a virgin. V'samach le'almanu grusha v'chalola zona lo yikach. And then it says that he's not allowed to marry an almana, grusha, chalola, and zona. And so we understand that the two are compared. Kol shata korei ba kishehi besula yikach. Somebody who, when she's a besula, he's allowed to marry her. Meaning, deru'uya l'kohen gadol, it's somebody that's fit for this kohen gadol. Yesh no bebal yikachem ha'isa almana. So then there's the negative commandment. Let's say she's an almana. But prat l'kohen gadol, that would exclude the following. Let's say a kohen gadol is with his sister who's an almana. Since he can't be with her because she's his sister, there is no separate violation of almana. She'eno loka ela mishum isser kahuna. The point is, he's not going to get malchus because he violated the isser kahuna. Ela mishum isser achoso. He's just going to get punished because he violated the isser to be with his sister. That's going to be the isser that is chal, not the isser of almana. And the Gemara now continues. Amar lei, so he said back to him, this is Rav Shesha saying back to the person who recited this brisa, he said back to him, Da Amar loch mani. So who's the author? Who says this? Rabbi Shimoni, it seems to be Rabbi Shimon's shita. Da Amar ein iser chal al iser. Rabbi Shimon's shita is that one iser is not able to be chal on another iser, which is exactly what's happening over here. There's the iser of achoso and the iser of almona cannot be chal. Where do we see that Rabbi Shimon holds ein iser chal al iser? The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Rabbi Shimon says, ha'ochel nevela b'yom kippurim. If somebody eats a nevela on Yom Kippur, so pater, so he's pater, meaning he's pater from the kares, from the isser of Yom Kippur. And Rashi says pater mikares, he's pater from kares. Why? The lo asi isser Yom Kippurim umeichal isser nevela dekadim, because you already have the isser nevela that came first. So the isser of Yom Kippur can no longer be chal. Im nisnavla me'er of Yom Kippurim. So first of all, the isser of nevela comes first. Certainly, if it was a nevela before Yom Kippur, harei kadam isser nevela. Certainly, the isser of nevela came first. Vim nisnavla b'Yom Kippur, and even if it became a nevela on Yom Kippur, that's when the animal died. Afilu achi asura ha'isala mi'be'er, but still it was asur from before Yom Kippur, mishum eivrim and achai, because that would be included in eivrim and achai. This was an animal that was alive. It was not a shechted animal, and so therefore again we see Rabbi Shimon holds that ein isur chal al isur, and that's the explanation of this halacha as well by the Kohen Gadol who has relations with his sister who's an almana. And the Gemara continues the rabbanan, because if you're going to say it's the rabbanan, ha'amri isur chal al isur, they say that an isur is chal on an isur. And so therefore over here the Isra of Almana should be in effect as well. And the Gemara says not necessarily. Afilu teim Rabbanan. You could even say that this is the Rabbanan's shita, even though the Rabbanan say that Isra is chal al Isra, but over here by Almana, by the Kohen Gadol, it's not true. Ki amri Rabbanan Isra chal al Isra, because when do the Rabbanan say one Isra can be chal on another Isra? Hani mili Isra chomer al Isra kal. That's if you have a stricter Isra being chal on a lighter Isra, meaning the Isra of Yom Kippur is strict, it's kares, and it's being chal on the lighter Isra of Nevela, which is just a lav. Aval Isra kal al Isra chomer, but over here it's the opposite. You have the Isra of the sister that's much more strict. So the lenient Isser, so to speak, of Almon is not going to be Chal, lo Chayil. Even the Rabbanan would agree that an Isser Kal is not going to be Chal on an Isser Chamor. And the Gemara continues, Ika Diyamri, there are some that have the version as follows. Hamani Rabbanan, that initially the Gemara actually says this is the Rabbanan who say, Ein Isser Chal al Isser. Why? Diyamri Isser Chal al Isser, because in general they say Isser is Chal al Isser. But V'chiyamri Rabbanan Isser Chal al Isser. But when do they say Isser is Chal al Isser? Hani Mili Isser Chamar al Isser Kal. That's only if it's a stricter Isser on a lighter Isser. Aval Isser Kal al Isser Chamar lo Chayil. But again, by a lighter Isser and a stricter Isser, it would not be Chal, and that would explain why there's no Isser of Almona. The Rabbi Shimon, because if you're going to say Rabbi Shimon hashta Isser Chamar al Isser Kal lo Chayil, if an Isser Chamar is not Chal and an Isser Kal, Isser Kal Isser Chamar mimi boy, you don't even need to say an Isser Kal and an Isser Chamar. It's too obvious. And the Gemara says it's not too obvious. Ma'u detema, what might you have said Isser Kahuna Shani when you're talking about Isurim that have to do with Kohanim? By Kohanim, there's a lot of extra mitzvahs. Maybe that's different. And so Kamash Malan, so it would still be a Chiddush, even if we said it was Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rav Papa li Abaya. Rav Papa said to Abaya, Yisrael habal achoso. Let's say Yisrael has relations with his own sister. So Zona Mishavila. We know that makes the woman, the sister, into a Zona. But the question is, Chalola Mishavila or Lo Mishavila? Does this make her a Chalola also, or does it not make her a Chalola? Mi amrinan kal v'chomer mechayve lav and have a Chalola mechayve krisos lo kol shekain. Do we say it's a kal v'chomer? If she becomes a Chalola when there's a violation of a lav in the act of relations with her, so for sure in a situation where it's kares, like over here, a person with a sister, certainly that should make her a Chalola. Odilma, or maybe ein Chalola ela me Isser Kahuna. Maybe Chalola only applies if there's a prohibited relation a prohibited relationship that's relevant to the kahuna. There was some violation that a Kohen had, that he was with someone he's not allowed to be with, let's say with a grusha, that creates chalala, but maybe chalala is not created with just any violation. Amar Lei said to him, Ein chalala ela me'isr kahuna bilvad. The concept of chalala only exists if there is some kind of violation, if there's some kind of isr that has to do with kahuna. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Menaha milsa, from where we know this idea, to Amar Rabbanan, that which the Rabbanan say, Ein chalala ela me'isr kahuna, that chalala only applies if there's a violation that's relevant to the kahuna. We learn it from the following. The Tanyas, we learned in a Brisa, Lo yomar grusha b'kohen gadol. It doesn't have to say grusha by a kohen gadol. It says that a kohen gadol is not allowed to marry a divorcee. B'teisi b'kal v'chomer mikohen hedyot. It should be a simple kal v'chomer from a kohen hedyot, from a regular kohen who can't marry a grusha. V'anoa mina, I'll say as follows: Hashta l'kohen hedyot asura. If a grusha is asur to a regular kohen, l'kohen gadol miboy. Certainly a grusha is asur to a kohen gadol. So lama nemra. So what's the reason why grusha was stated by a kohen gadol? And the idea is kashem shechaluka grusha mizona v'chalola b'kohen hedyot. Just like grusha is separated out from zona and chalola by kohen hedyot, kach chaluka b'kohen gadol. The same thing is true by kohen gadol, and it's going to be a separate violation. And Rashi explains, Kashem shechaluka grusha mizona v'chalola hu amuros eitzel kohen hedyot, meaning there was isurim, there was lavin that was said by kohen hedyot, isha grusha zona v'chalola, not allowed to marry those individuals, sheyichid lo lav liatzma, but there's a separate lav when it comes to grusha. The pasuk says isha zona v'chalola lo yikachu, and then it says separately v'isha grusha meisha lo yikachu, that he's not allowed to take a woman who's a divorcee. L'lamedcha, what does that come to teach you? Shim zona v'chalola ugrusha, that let's say she's a woman who's a zona chalola and a grusha, he loka le'af misham grusha, so she's going to get a separate malchus because of grusha. It's like separate. Kach chaluka b'kohen gadol, so too that's going to be true by kohen gadol as well. Afa b'shenemru bo b'lav echad, even though it's all said in one lav, but still grusha is considered like a separate violation. That's what it's teaching us. That's why it's saying grusha by a kohen gadol, to tell you that it's separated. And the Gemara says, well, 1 second, pshita, that's also obvious. Migra gara, again, why should a kohen gadol be any less than a regular kohen? A kohen gadol essentially is also a regular kohen. As Rashi says, pshita migra gara bitmi of v'chim b'nei shenasa kohen gadol, just because this kohen became also kohen gadol, nismata kedusha, so now you think his kedusha is less. Halome hedyot tusa nechleko lav l'shnei lavin. It's already 2 lavin when he was a kohen hedyot. Of course it's going to be 2 lavin here as well. That would not be a reason to restate grusha. And so the Gemara instead says it means as follows. What it means is as follows. Just like grusha is separate from zona and chalola by kohen hedyot, kach almona chaluka migrusha v'chalola zona b'kohen gadol, so too almona is actually separate from grusha, chalola, and zona by a kohen gadol. And Rashi explains, Kach chaluka almona migrusha shimhaisa almona grusha v'chalola zona, means to say as follows. Let's say she's an almona, grusha, chalola, and a zona. The point is chayev al kol achas v'achas. There's going to be a separate chayev for each one. V'hayden nakatana lefluge almona lechuda. Now, why are we focusing on almona if it's a separate one for each one? V'lo itzrich lefluge chalola mizona. We don't need to separate chalola from zona. Mishum de chalola du muchlekas mizona mikohen hedyot kimlon. Rashi says we already know that chalola is separate from zona from by kohen hedyot. The Goli begrusha v'hu adin b'chalola. Rashi understands what we say by grusha is true by the other ones as well. It's true by chalola as well. Aval almona di tosa b'kohen gadol, but almona, which is an extra lav by a kohen gadol, doesn't exist by a kohen hedyot. V'lo matzinu bashin eschalka. We don't find that it's divided up and that it's separate. It's trichlei lemelef. So that's why we need to learn it out. But really, they are all separate from each other. That's what we're really saying. And the Gemara continues, Chalala lama nemra. If that's the case, why does it have to say Chalala by a kohen gadol? Again, a kohen gadol is no different than a kohen hedyot. And from that we learn, the halacha we said above, Ein Chalala ela me'isr kuna, that there is no Chalala unless it involves a violation, a prohibition that's relevant to the kahuna. Zona lama nemra, similar question, why does it say Zona? The answer to that is Nemar kan zona. It says over here the word Zona, v'nemar lahalon zona. And it says further on, by kohen hedyot it says zona as well. Makan zaro chulin, just like over here, the children become chulin. Af lahalon zaro chulin. So too over there, the children are considered to be chulin. And Rashi says chalala lama nemra. Why does it say chalala? Hare asur kohen hedyot. Again, we already know chalala by kohen hedyot. Lama lach ein chalala ela me'isr kuna. That tells us this exact halacha. Chalala is only from a violation of some kind of relationship that's prohibited by the kahuna. Mikra yisera darshin. And this is learned from the extra pasuk. The hay dehadar kasva lachi kasva. The reason it's written again is just for this reason. Lomar shetilman miseder hoamar chalala achar almona grusha shein yisuran noeg ela bekohanim. We're trying to say it only applies by the yisurim that are relevant to kohanim. V'lo kosva achar zona. It's not written after zona. It's written after almana and grusha. Shematzinu shem znus posel b'Yisrael, because znus again is something relevant to Yisrael also. Lomar loch shein nikras chalal elam bias psul kahuna levada. So from where it's placed in the pasuk, we understand it has to do with something that's a psul kahuna. V'lo bias isra hanoeg af b'Yisrael, not from something that applies even by Yisrael. And then we said, why does it say zona? And again, the reason is because it says zona here, it says zona is there. V'namar lahalan b'kohen hedyot, it says by kohen hedyot zona. Makan b'kohen gadol zaro chulin. Just like over here by kohen gadol, the children are considered to be profane. D'chsiv lo yechalel, that's what the pasuk says. Lo yechalel, so the same thing is going to be true by a kohen hedyot as well. Af lahalan zaro chulin. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi says, Hilkach therefore, Kohen habal achos, if a Kohen has relations with his sister, Rashi says, Hilkach therefore, Hoel ve'ein chalola ela meser kahuna, since there's only a concept of chalola, if there's some kind of violation of a prohibition by kahuna, so Kohen hedyot or Kohen gadol, if you have a Kohen hedyot or a Kohen gadol, Shabal achos penuyo, who has relations with his sister, who's an unmarried woman, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Ches Amud Aleph.